Welcome back to Fashion here, and today we'll be talking about Ferrari. Now for Ferrari, I think they've had a pretty strong 2026 season so far. Of course, they have 2 wins, one courtesy of Hamilton at the Barcelona Grand Prix, another win courtesy of Leclerc at the British Grand Prix. Now, first taking a look at qualifying performance from this team, I think definitely a big step forward compared to where they were at the end of the last regulation cycle 2025, where they were pretty clearly the 4th best team in qualifying. This year, they've generally been about 2nd best, and I would say they've, looking at the average pole gap as a 3-race rolling average, they've generally been the 2nd best team over the course of the season. That being said, a little bit of a surprise that they were not the team to stop Mercedes' streak of pole positions. Of course, that was McLaren last time out. So it'll be interesting to see if, again, like I mentioned in my video yesterday talking about McLaren, if McLaren's form in qualifying continues and they're very, very close with Mercedes, and if that drops Ferrari to 3rd or even 4th best in qualifying, or if this generally pretty consistent level of performance that they've had continues after the summer break. Now, looking more specifically at the data, worst race in terms of 3-race rolling average, a bit like McLaren, was the first race of the season in Australia. A bit of an anomaly. They were about 0.8 of a second off pole there. Best race of the season would be, actually the Austrian Grand Prix, 1.76 of a second, and they kind of went a bit backwards since then, but have generally been in the 0.2 of a second range for quite a while now, for about the second quarter of the season. Now, taking a look at their 2 drivers, Leclerc and Hamilton, we're talking about Leclerc first simply because he's ahead in the qualifying head-to-head. Now, for that qualifying head-to-head, Leclerc leads 7-4, but based on how I calculate qualifying victories, if a driver does not set a time in a session, whether it be mechanical issue, crash, grid penalties, meaning that it was pointless for the driver to set a lap time anyway, I will take a look at the qualifying session before that. So if this was Q3, I look at Q2. So of course for Leclerc, he did have that crash in qualifying at this Barcelona Grand Prix, but he did out-qualify Hamilton in the Q2 session before that. So technically it was a qualifying victory for Leclerc, even though really it was for Hamilton, just to keep it really consistent and simple. But qualifying margin, 0.06 of a second, very, very small, a little bit smaller than what we saw last year. And it does suggest that, Hamilton's much happier with this generation of car compared to the ground effect cars. And I think Leclerc is having a little bit of a difficult time adapting, which is why the gap is considerably smaller. But Leclerc has generally been, I think, marginally better of the 2 in qualifying. Average starting position, 4.27 for Leclerc. For Hamilton, 4.36. So that kind of reflects that difference in qualifying. Average finishing position, though, quite different. Leclerc, 4.11, so marginally improving on his starting position. And for Hamilton, 3.76, so he's improving by about half a position or so in the races, but is improving more than his teammate Leclerc. Race head-to-head, though, is very interesting. Leclerc actually leads here 5-4. I think really the races where Hamilton's had some of his best results, such as when he won the Barcelona Grand Prix, Leclerc didn't finish the race with some kind of mechanical issue. So that does kind of skew it, where it does feel like Hamilton's best weekends, Leclerc's hasn't really been there. Like, for example, Monaco, where he crashed out, I believe he was behind Hamilton and was likely going to finish behind in that race as well. But for points, again, very different story from race head-to-head. 138 points for Leclerc, 169 for Hamilton. Leclerc currently 4th in the Drivers' Championship, and Hamilton, a little bit of a surprise, currently 2nd in the Drivers' Championship, ahead of the Mercedes of George Russell. But that being said, for Hamilton, still well behind Kimi Antonelli, and with the lack of, I would say, just pure raw pace from Ferrari, even though the gap is smaller than the gap that, for example, Verstappen overturned on Piastri at the end of 2025, it doesn't really feel like, unless things massively change in terms of pure performance, I don't really expect Hamilton to mount a massive title challenge the way that Verstappen was able to last year. Now, taking a look at the 2 drivers individually, for Leclerc, it's very up and down, I would say. So qualifying, I think, has been pretty good. Quality rating of negative 0.587, which ranks 4th on this year's grid, so very, very good. Race rating, however, not so good. Positive 0.154, a little bit above average. but it does only rank 10th, and it's a far cry below what we've kind of come to expect from Leclerc the last 5-6 years or so. Points above expected also pretty bad, negative 11.7 or 91%, and that ranks 14th on the grid. For Leclerc, historically, he's generally been in the 105 to 110% range, I would say, so the fact that he's in the 90s is a bit of a surprise. That being said, I do think the form's been marginally better as of late, and we'll see if that form continues second half of the season. Then we move to the other side of the garage and talk about Lewis Hamilton, who I think has been one of the best drivers so far this season, along with Norris, along with Verstappen, along with Antonelli as well. Quality rating is actually second, and again, one of those scenarios where, despite the fact Leclerc is leading the head-to-head, Hamilton comes out on top here. And again, races like Barcelona, where Leclerc crashes out in qualifying, Hamilton has a pretty good qualifying session, would definitely be in results in Hamilton's favor. A quality rating, negative 0.604, which ranks second. It's been a long time since Hamilton's had a quality rating that good. I think he would have to go back to like 2017, 2018 to get a rating that good. So a little bit of a surprise, a bit of a late career renaissance in his early 40s. But it'll be interesting to see if that form holds second half of the season. Race rating, very good, positive 0.863, which ranks third. I would say just about right about career average, especially aging and experience corrected for Hamilton. I think he could have been a little bit better. There have been races that have been a little bit messy, like last time out in Hungary with all the penalties I picked up in that race. But for Hamilton, I think he's been pretty good. Maybe not at his best, like his personal best, his championship winning years at Mercedes. I think we're still a bit better. But that being said, definitely better and an improvement from last year. Points above expected, positive 18.8 or 114%, which ranks fourth. That 114% is actually a little bit above his career average, which I think is about 107, 108%. So again, very good season for Hamilton, although 114 I think is very close to what he was doing his championship winning years. So yeah, very, very good for Hamilton, a bit of a flashback, or a throwback, I should say, to those late Mercedes years where he was so strong in race performance, something that we hadn't really seen a whole lot of during the ground effect era. Although I think for me, the ground effect era was a lot more struggles in qualifying that then translated into worse results in the races, because generally his race rating, points above expected, were generally still pretty good even in the ground effect area. It was really just the qualifying that took a big hit. So that's really been the big improvement, the big change from last year. Now, in terms of second half of the season, I think the two drivers are going to be wanting to get more wins, of course. I think Championship Challenge, like I said, is a little bit too far gone unless there's a big turnaround in performance and Ferrari can suddenly be the fastest team for the second half of the season. In terms of driver market, I think Leclerc staying, we know that. Hamilton is almost certainly going to be staying. I can't see them dropping him for Behrman with how well he's performing. You know, he's ranked second, third, fourth on the grid this year. Very, very good results, and generally in many cases better than his teammate Leclerc. The only case that I could see is, like I mentioned in the grid prediction video, would be if Ferrari were so terrified of potentially letting Behrman losing Behrman to another team, that they would rather have Behrman in the team and just let for Hamilton retire or go on somewhere else. But don't see that happening, and I think likely they're going to stick with their current driver line for another year. But that's all for this video, analyzing the two Ferrari drivers at the start and their, I guess, first half, not just start, first half of the 2026 F1 season. Thank you so much for watching, and goodbye.